Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is time once again to talk about Star Wars X-Wing miniatures by Fantasy Flight Games. So, Gencon was last week, and like me and almost everybody else predicted, Wave XII was announced! Hooray! And actually, it was announced at Gencon, but I waited to record this episode until they posted the official article, which was today, so you know what day I'm recording this on. And that gave me better visuals, which I can include. And hopefully those visuals are up right now. So it's not a huge spoiler what ships have been announced. There's the Alpha-class Star Wing, aka the Assault Gunboat, finally. The M12L Kimogila Fighter. And the Phantom II expansion pack, aka the Sheathipede Shuttle. Wow, that actually rolls off the tongue. I kind of like that, Sheathipede. Anyway, this video is going to probably be a little bit longer since I'm going to talk about all three announcements and what we know for sure. And also what can be inferred from looking at the fans they've shown off. So, this one will probably be a little less edited than some of my other ones, but hopefully that's okay. So first let's talk about the Assault Gunboat, here referred as the Alpha-class Star Wing. That's its full name. So we can see in the fan some things. Obviously one of these things is new, but we'll cover that in a second, because that's got an actual reference card and I want to put that art up on the screen. So right now you should be seeing the fan. So the Alpha-class Star Wings got 2 attack, 2 agility, 4 hull, and 3 shields. Actually, it sounds a lot like a Rebel heavy fighter. And that's kind of the role the ship plays for the Imperials. It's definitely a slower, heavier fighter. We can see right there the action bar is focus, target lock, slam, and a new action icon, reload. We're going to talk about reload later. That's what I was talking about with the reference card. That'll come up after we cover some of the other stuff in this pack, because it's got an actual image and I don't want to have to keep switching back and forth. We can also see the upgrade bar. Baseline, it has torpedo, missile, and the highest level pilot has an EPT. There is a 2, a 4, a 5, and a 7. So there's New Squadron, Row Squadron, that's straight out of the original. I think TIE Fighter was where they were referred to as New and Row, but that might be an X-Wing. The original PC game. There's a Lieutenant somebody, and we can see Major Vinder in the spread as the PS7, 26 points. The level 4 might have an EPT, might not. We'll see how that goes. There is a new EPT in the fan. Slam is obviously pretty interesting. And in fact, if I was a better audio editor, and I knew exactly how much I could get away with, I would totally put in a Space Jam sound clip right now, because, baby, finally, you can slam and you can jam. Come on, it's time to slam now. And Major Vinder's ability that we can see is that he says, when defending, if you have a weapons disabled token, roll 1 additional defense die. So when he slams, or as we'll see later, when he reloads, or both, he gets an extra defense. That's pretty good, because it lets him soften himself up. We can also see some other cards in the fan. There's an EPT that starts with an S. We can see that also in the Kimogila. That's probably like Saturation Fire or Saturation Salvo. I think it has like an S in there somewhere. We'll work that out. There's a copy of Cruise Missile. So if you're an Imperial and you really want to use those cruise missiles that came with the H6, here's your pack, and possibly another ship to use it in. There's a Jamming Beam Cannon, which will almost assuredly be related to the jam tokens, which are now included. And don't worry, we'll get to those too. That's on the same reference card as the reload action, for some reason. There's a linked batteries cannon upgrade, which is small ship only. We're not quite sure what that does, but it looks like when you do something with a primary weapon attack, maybe you do something with a secondary cannon. We'll see if that lets you, do double taps. Now you may be wondering, how can the Star Wing do a double tap with a cannon if 1, it doesn't have a cannon upgrade in its bar, and 2, if the linked batteries is also a cannon upgrade? Well, here, let's switch over to that for a second. So, here you can see the XG1 Assault Configuration title for the Star Wing. This is the first title we can see. There is also probably an OS1 something loadout, which appears to be very similar. This is a 1-point title. Your upgrade bar gains 2 cannon upgrade icons. You may perform attacks with cannon secondary weapons that cost 2 or fewer squad points, even while you have a weapon disable token. So assuredly, Jamming Beam will be 2 or less points. Probably 1 like Tractor Beam, since that'll probably be its effect. That can also include Flechette Cannons. I think it might include the Ion Cannon, but I'm not sure. We'll have to double check. But the more important thing here is that you can, in fact, slam and jam. Because you can use the slam action, which normally gives you a weapon disabled token. And you can also do a cannon attack, even if it's just flechettes. So hey, that's probably pretty neat. And the OS1 title, or the OS1 loadout, looks like it can probably do something similar, but with torpedoes, maybe? So that's pretty interesting. We can only see a 3-bank from the dial. Don't be surprised if it can't go faster than 3. This thing can slam, so I'm expecting a K-Wing type dial, but maybe some more green in there to benefit the Empire style. The Starwing is supposed to be one of the Empire's most flexible craft, and that is true. It was a attempt at a multi-purpose long-range ship that kind of filled in the gap between the first run of TIE fighters like the Line Fighter and the Bomber, and then into their more generalized advanced types like the TIE Advanced, like the TIE Defender, those sorts of things that we see. And it had a lot of uses as kind of a long-range craft. In the original X-Wing game, it was your middle-tier enemy upgrade to give Imperial's ships shields and hyperdrive so they could just come out of nowhere and ruin your day. So that's pretty interesting, this ship. I think it's going to do a lot for, like, lore and stuff. Like, it really looks like it's going to fit its role into what it's supposed to do. Obviously, it has Slam, though that's technically more the missile boat, but still, it's really cool that the Empire now has access to the Slam. Sorry, I had to take a drink there. That was previously only available to Rebels or Scum, thanks to Burnout Slam. And the Empire is the second faction that gets access to a permanent Slam. So here's why the fact that it can slam is important, and also that new action icon, Reload. So the Reload icon lets you perform a reload action. To reload, choose any number of the ship's equipped discarded torpedo or missile upgrades, not bombs, and flip them face up, then assign your ship a weapons disabled token. So that's a pretty interesting effect. It should be noted that this pack does come with advanced slam, which means you can slam and reload, and all weapons disabled tokens are discarded. And also, explicitly, we can at least know you can use support type cannons along with slamming, which is pretty cool. We don't know for sure if the OS loadout will allow torpedoes to be used in a similar way. They might. I don't think there are very many cheap torpedoes, and there are no torpedoes in this pack. There's only cruise missiles in terms of disposable ordnance. So that'll be pretty interesting. So yeah, no, now reusable ordnance is permanently in the game, not just in niche uses like bomblets or unguided, and not just in specific pilot abilities like Quinn Jast, though I will say Quinn's ability is, strictly speaking, better than the reload action because they do not require an action. But, yeah, no, that's the thing. I expect if this is actually worth it, it'll get added to torpedo and missile ships that are a little older, but remember, it doesn't affect bombs. Probably because bombs are doing pretty good right now. Which also means that Scavenger Crane still has a use. Some people were concerned that this sort of thing would take it over completely. It won't. And now the other thing to note is this reference card also talks about jam tokens. It's even at the top. So jam token, if a ship has a focus, evade, or blue target lock token, when it is assigned a jam token, or when it has both tokens, really, you immediately remove the jam token, and then that ship chooses and removes one of its focus, evade, or blue target locks. So it gets to pick. And then ongoing, a ship is counted as jammed if it has a jam token. There's not really any definition of what the jam status means, so it's probably just a keyword other effects will refer to. Or perhaps it will be another kind of command in there. We don't know. It'll be good to see. And so, yeah, jam is basically a permanent action economy drain. It cancels a token. Either when you stick it on there, it automatically cancels a token, or if they don't have any tokens, you can stall them. It's only really good versus token stackers, though. For instance, Luke Skywalker, he's completely fine. He's got a token. He doesn't need one. that sort of thing. Other ships that get mods without tokens don't care. I think this is a little behind the curve, but it's pretty clear that this sort of thing, and some stuff we're going to see in a second, because we're going to talk about the Kimogila and its new thing, is that this wave really has a lot to target Mind Link and those sorts of shenanigan ships. Like, a lot of people figured that, the only way to deal with Mind Link would be to nerf it to get rid of it. No, it appears the thing to do is to introduce new rules, which means you can futz with people's ability to use tokens. So, that's, I think, all there is to talk about Reload and Jam specifically. So far, the Kimogila and the Starwing are the ones that can reload. The Phantom 2 does not have it, but it doesn't even use Ordnance. It's possible we'll see it in some of the other ships. If, for instance, we got a Resistance Bomber, if that's actually a thing that fits in the scale of X-Wing, that might be a good candidate for a reload, though it definitely seems like it's more bomb-focused than, like, torpedoes or missiles. We'll see. Jam will probably come up more. So that's Jammed. And Reload. So we're going to immediately move to another reference card. This one for the Kimogila specifically, the Bullseye Firing Arc. This is a new firing arc. It's drawn inside your primary firing arc in the front. It's about the width of a maneuver template, so you can always pre-measure if something's in your bullseye by doing straight maneuvers. And basically, as you can see, when attacking, if the defender is inside your bullseye firing arc, the defender cannot spend focus tokens to modify defense dice or evade tokens to add evade results. This does not necessarily include spending focus or evade tokens for other things. Reinforce still matters for this, because that's not a token that is spent. Other things that add results don't work. But in general, if you're caught in the bullseye, you can't spend tokens. Some people are concerned about this to do with Imperial Aces. I don't think that's something bad about the bullseye specifically. But Imperial token stacking type aces, which aren't that popular anymore anyway, let's be honest. Like, that's not a area where things have been going well anyway. There's only one thing to be concerned about there, and that's that there's a PS8 pilot in this who has an EPT, so they can take VI. Theoretically, they can go at PS10, as we'll see. They have a barrel roll, but because of how narrow the bullseye is, especially on a small base ship, I don't think it'll be as huge of a deal. It will be a thing that hurts them when it applies, but it's not going to apply all the time, you know what I'm saying? And that's really all there is about bullseye, other than I've heard some people complain that they kind of wish this had been a rule from the start, and I can see that. It's definitely kind of interesting, but I think it makes sense the way the Mini is at least laid out, because that's kind of like directly in the center line of fire of some particular heavy guns in the center of the ship, which aren't as maneuverable as the wingtip guns, so maybe. We'll see, anyway. So now that we've got the new reference card out of the way, let's snap to the Kimogila itself. What we can see in its underlying frame, its chassis, some people might say. This one is a fairly typical 3 attack, 1 agility, and then it's got 6 hull and 2 shields. So you can definitely see that it's a ship in the similar vein to the Assault Gunboat. Obviously, it has a slight advantage because it has 3 primaries, so it can G-chips to a crit, but it suffers in that it's got less shields and only 1 agility. This thing is going to melt a lot, especially considering they explicitly say in the article that the Kimogila it's a blunt instrument, and it has a hard time turning sharply, especially in close quarters. So don't expect this thing to have 1 turns, and it probably has 2 turns, which might be red or white. If it's got 3 turns, what color they are doesn't matter, because as you can see, it has a salvaged astromech slot. But let's run through that bar in a second. Upgrade bar is focus, target lock, barrel roll, as I mentioned earlier, and reload, as I mentioned earlier. The visible cost for the PS8 is 27 points, and that guy packs an EPT, so there will be some of that. We can see that the PS5 has an EPT, and they do torpedo and missiles, just like the gunboat, and then they have salvaged astromech and illicit, which is a pretty good spread, and very lore appropriate, I might add. The Kimogila is from the same manufacturers as the Seek Mandel motors. They're also responsible for the Fang Fighters and Gauntlet transports you see. They produced also some other Scum-style ships. They're the original manufacturers of the Star Viper, for instance. Pretty cool to see them get more action. There's a couple more ships they designed for Star Wars Galaxies, which is where this comes from, that are, I think, kind of neat designs that I'd like to see in the game. Anyway, we can see that they've got a 4K turn at least, so that's something. Probably not got any better maneuvers than that. Obviously, the salvaged Astro slot means they can take unhinged, so all their speed 3s can be green. The PS8, as I said, costs 27 points. I think they are Tyranny Kulda. It's a little hard to see. Their ability seems to be after you perform an attack, each enemy ship inside your bullseye firing arc at range 1 to 3 must choose to suffer 1 damage and remove all of its focus and evade tokens. So yeah, the fact that that guy can become PS10 and does technically have a reposition action, though it's not super flexible because it's a straight line. It's not, strictly speaking, an arc. Even though it's called an arc, it's a rectangular zone. That's going to put some real hurt on token stacking. I think it's especially bad for large ships, because if you know that there's going to be a bullseye and this thing doesn't have a lot of flexible maneuvers, it's entirely possible that even with the barrel roll, you should be able to position smaller ships with reposition options well out of the way of these sorts of things. And obviously, certain things still come into play. Like, for instance, the bonus evade from Protectorate Title, I believe, would still proc, for instance. Stuff like that. So that might become more important in the face of Kimogilas. The Kimogila has a unique title, Enforcer, 1 point. After defending, if the attacker is in your bullseye firing arc, it receives 1 stress token. So there's another one of those, up front, in your face. Probably means that Fearlessness might be pretty fun on these things. We can see that it also comes with some new cards in the pack. There's that Saturation EPT again. It comes with a copy of Plasma Torpedoes. There's quite a few jam tokens in this set, and it comes with 2 copies of something called Scrambler missiles. So that'll probably be your ion torpedo equivalent or other burst missile, which will let you dish out jam tokens to an area. There's a new illicit called Control Cyb something, and there's a gank on the front, so probably like Controller Cybernetics or something. And it's got a lot of stuff about phases, cards, and tokens. We can't really tell. There's a copy of Deadman Switch. No idea if that'll be any good on this ship, but it's a thing. And then there's a new 0-point unique salvaged astromech R5TK, but its ability is completely blocked off by the thing. I assume it'll have something to do with munitions, probably. Possibly self-damaging munitions. So that's the Kimogila. Let's move on to the last ship. So last up is the Phantom 2 pack, the Sheathipede Shuttle. I still feel like that's kind of fun to say. Sheathipede. This one has a interesting underlying stat line. We've got the good old 2 attack with an auxiliary rear firing arc. And it has a crew slot, which means it can take tail gunner, so there's another ship that works on. It has 2 agility, 4 hull, 1 shields. A little fragile, but it's also pretty cheap. The highest is a PS9. It's Fen Rao, by the way. Rebel Fen Rao is finally a thing. And he only costs 20 points. So that's a pretty light ship. There's a unique PS1, which is probably AP5, which will be pretty darn cheap. So, action bar is focus, target lock. Not really sure why it has target lock, since it doesn't appear to have any munitions on its own, but, whatever. It probably needs the dice mods with 2 attack dice, and the coordinate action. So yes, Rebels finally get their coordinate. Everybody thought it would be really good for them to have. Some people were even thinking the resistance transport would be a thing, and it would give them coordinate. Nope. It's the Sheathipede. And specifically the Phantom 2 title, which is in this pack, along with a new copy of the Ghost title for the Phantom 2, lets you perform special arc attacks with the Ghost, but also, when you are docked with the Ghost, you perform a free coordinate action at the end of the activation phase, which means, similar to Ashoka's ability, you get a coordinate pop at range 1 to 2 which I believe is slightly better, because if memory serves me right, Ahsoka's only range 1, and she needs a focus token, so that can kind of limit her a little. This is a little more flexible, but obviously that means that you've got to get a ghost in there with a shuttle. So we'll see if that actually plays out. So Fen Rao's ability seems to be now, when an enemy ship inside your firing arc at range 1 to 3 becomes active during the combat phase, or becomes the active ship during the combat phase, if you are not stressed, you may receive 1 stress token. If you do, that ship cannot spend tokens to modify its dice when attacking this round. So, as you can see, the theme of this definitely seems to be fuck you tokens. Now, depending on what the greens on this thing are like, and we don't know because we can only see that it has a white 3-bank, a very typical maneuver, we can assume it has a 2 white forward. Hopefully it has a more unique dial than the attack shuttle. But we don't know how easy it'll be for it to shed stress. You might definitely want to put some stress healing abilities in its slots. We'll see about that. Oh, and the upgrade bar is EPT for the highest. Presumably at least Fen Rao and Ezra, because Ezra's in there too. And crew and astromech, which is pretty much what I thought this would be, with the Ox Arc, and then it's got crew and astromech. And the minis even got a little chopper up in the corner there. Look how cute he is. Pilots we can see are Ezra, Zeb, and then the PS1 who starts with an A. Once again, probably AP5. It's interesting to see Zeb in there again. I think he might have actually flown the Phantom 2 at some time, but, you know, he's not another copy of Sabine. Also, I think Ezra's pilot skill has gone up. So we'll see. I think his ability is the same, though. There's not a lot of other cards in the pack. There's a version of Chopper as an actual astromech upgrade, which appears to have an action, and then equipped and recover. Possible he lets you discard upgrades to recover shields in kind of a really ghetto regen way. And then there's something Flight Astromech, which looks to be something to do with performing barrel roll actions. If you end up in somebody's firing arc, depending on how costly it is, that could be pretty cool for X-Wings. It also looks like you can't attack outside of your firing arc, so it'll stop TLT Y-Wings from doing that. There's a generic crew that we can't see at all, so that'll have to wait until the proper spoiler. And then there's a unique crew who's in very red and black colors and starts with an M and is scum only and some other very complex restriction text, which is probably Maul. And people are assuming that his deal is that he's either scum only, or if you have a copy of Ezra somewhere in your squad building list, you can add Maul as a rebel. Possibly. We'll see. That might be really interesting. And as far as people can tell, it looks a lot like his ability is basically the reverse of Zuckuss. If you're not stressed, you can reroll attack dice to take stress. And then, if you perform an attack that hits, we think you can ditch one of your stress tokens. Maybe. So, lots of questions, lots of answers. Actually, all of these ships are pretty neat. I like them a lot. The Phantom 2's design isn't super stellar, but, you know, it's a thing. It does different things. I actually kind of like that it has coordinate, and it does add, coordinate into the broader Rebel faction. That's pretty neat. And the fact that it's going to be a cheap pocket Crew Astro, we already know from arcs that you can do some interesting things with Crew Astro. And it made Fen Rao, of all people, a PS9, and honest to God, support PS9. In fact, I joked about this before. It sounds like Fen Rao's main move is to counter Fen Rao. He exists to stop people who would spend tokens on their attacks at PS9. So all in all, that's a pretty neat wave. So there it is. That's Wave 12, as has been revealed so far. Like I said, expect a Force Friday 2 announcement, which I believe is September the 1st, which will reveal at least 2 ships from The Last Jedi. My money's on something to do with the Resistance A, even though I'm really skeptical that that's actually a different thing, but whatever. FFG has access to LFL. And probably the TIE Silencer, because that's actually a new design which they're hyping up pretty heavily. I'd love to see more in different things, though. We'll see on that front. So that's where we are. That's today's episode. If you liked it, go ahead and give it a like. If you have any comments on any of the things you've seen here today, if you want to discuss any of the particular upgrades, you know, there are some internet detectives who are working on trying to crack what the actual text of some of these cards is. Feel free to drop those down below in the comment section. Obviously, subscribe for more, because we're in a time when there's some news coming out. There will be more announcements, more previews, all that stuff. And actually, something else to think about is I think I'm going to start doing videos about the newly announced War Minis game by FFG, Star Wars Legion, because that looks really fun, and I think we could really get into some stuff talking about that. But we'll have that up next time, maybe when they've got some more detailed like previews and stuff. Because there's not a lot to talk about right now other than kind of explaining some general stuff, and as always, you know I love to do my mob visuals. Anyway, thanks for your time, and I'll see you later.